Welcome to the SAG-AFTRA Foundation Career Retrospectives. I'm Adam Lance Garcia from Condé Nast. It's critical our audience know that the SAG-AFTRA Foundation has a COVID relief fund to support SAG-AFTRA performers who are in urgent need as this pandemic continues. Since March of 2020, the foundation has given nearly $6 million in aid to over 6,300 performers and families facing extreme hardship. If you are a SAG-AFTRA member and you need help, please ask. And if you are able to help support our community and this crucial effort, please give. Information can be found in the description of this video. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce Frank Langella. Frank, it's an absolute wonder to see you again. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you, Adam. Pleasure to be here.
I want to start our conversation talking about your most recent role as Judge Julius Hoffman in Aaron Sorkin's The Trial of the Chicago 7. One thing, we had talked about this before, but he is it's hard to love that character. He is one of those characters that he comes in as a kindly grandfather-like figure, and that veneer passes very quickly. I was wondering, how did you approach this character when you were first given the role?
Well, I came to the conclusion that he was not even a kindly grandfather figure. I came to the conclusion that the very moment he entered camera for the first time, his aura should be one of slight befuddlement and great corruption, none of which I played. I didn't walk in like a villain, but I felt strongly that this case was going to go the way I wanted it to go. And you could judge me however you wanted. But I knew there were no gray sides to him. I knew he was an evil and corrupt man.
When you're playing a historical character like Hoffman or Richard Nixon or even Richard Russell Jr., do you research them, or do you simply work with the director and what's presented in the script?
Well, if you're lucky, you have directors who feel you know more about the character than they do. Some directors don't feel that, and they try to impose. They try to direct you. The best directors say the least and interfere the least with the life of a character. The first day Ron Howard and I met on Nixon, he said, you know more about this guy than I do. Please send me a note every morning and tell me what the elements are in the scene you'd most like to exploit. So this morning I would say, I think Nixon's feeling this, I think that. And then we would have no more discussions. He would say slower, faster, again, please, whatever. But he trusted me. The same with Jay Roach on All the Way, and the same with Aaron on this. And in those three instances, it's an enormously great feeling for an actor to feel the man behind the camera is supporting him. Disagree all you want, have an exchange. But if an actor ever begins to feel the person behind the camera is not on his side, it can destroy him. He can come on with his heart wide open, and it can be shut in seconds. No matter how experienced you are as an actor, no matter how many times you've done this, you're very fragile because you want to reveal the truth of a character. And that means being terribly, terribly vulnerable. In order to be a great actor, I think, you have to always maintain that vulnerability in you and never get slick.
You've talked a lot about belief in your character. How do you find that belief, especially with characters like Hoffman, like Nixon, and several others that you've played that can be described as despicable characters? How do you defend them? Something that Aaron Sorkin talks a lot about is defending the character to God as to why they should get into heaven. How are you able to do that for the character that you're playing?
Well, I never defend any of my characters ever. I never, the evil ones in particular. I believe in them. I believe they're right. Bobby Seale should be gagged and bound, and I should do everything I can to get around David Frost when I played Nixon, and disagree violently with LBJ when I did All the Way. If you're defending him, you don't believe in him. You have to be, that's not to say you're not going to get defensive, of course, but you have to 100% believe in the man you're playing. If you don't believe me, then I'm not doing my job. If you're not, some of the greatest reviews I've ever gotten are from this movie, with people saying, I wanted to throw him off a bridge. Yeah. I hated him. He was vile. He was disgusting. He was so awful. And I went, oh, good. I did my job. And particularly when actors suffer from a destructive need, which is the need to be popular. You have to give that up very early in your career. You have to give up the idea that I want to be liked and I want to be, a friend of mine once told me, I can't give you a recipe for success, but I can give you a recipe for failure. Try to please everyone.
You talk about working to find the belief and being unpopular on set or unpopular in your roles. Can you talk about one of those examples where you had to be unpopular to fight for your character, to fight for that belief?
Yes, I can. I can speak to that. In 1916, when did I do Dracula? 1977. So in 1978, I went off to Europe with my new wife to shoot the movie of Dracula, which had been an enormous success on Broadway. And the movie rights were gained because of the success of my characterization of Dracula. Once we got into Pinewood Studios or locations, there was an enormous pressure on me by the director and the producer to wear fangs and wolf eyes and have blood dripping down my face and to be more evil, more scary, which I had to resist because I had created a character who I thought was more a lover, more a man who wanted desperately to be. Imagine living alone for 500 years all by yourself and getting into a coffin. That's very hard to imagine, wouldn't it? But getting into a coffin every night, and did I press my suit? I should have gone a bit. But you get in there and you're lying there all day, and then you wake up and you won't get through the night unless you drink a little blood. So I had a very strong feeling that he wanted to be in love, that he wanted Lucy to love him, as well as to supply him with what he needed. And he says that to her, now you will be the love. I can't remember the exact words, but you will, through all eternity, we will be together. He wanted a partner. But the producers wanted Hammer films. They wanted blood and guts and Christopher Lee stuff and Bela Lugosi stuff. So there was every day. This is not a heroic thing on my part, not at all. I'm not telling you I was at all brave. I was simply determined that the character I wanted to play a certain way would be played that way. And so I became very unpopular, not only with the producer and the director, but even several of the actors, because I just didn't want to do that kind of movie or that kind of part. But I've never suffered too much from that anyway. I've always felt my obligation is to the audience. My obligation isn't to how likable I can make myself. I like a set to be smooth and I like it to be congenial, as indeed was The Trial of the Chicago 7. But it's also been my experience, you can be on a film which everybody adores each other, and the film is lousy. And you can be in a film in which there's nothing but fighting and contention and problems, and the film turns out to be wonderful. And for me, the most important thing between action and cut is the truth of the character. And the most important thing is that you service a movie you hope is going to work.
You touch upon how much a film can change in edit. So much of what makes a film is decided in edit. Have you ever found any of your performances improved or damaged in edit?
I don't think epically or colossally, but I do remember a moment in Money Never Sleeps. What's it called? Wall Street.
Wall Street, yeah.
Money Never Sleeps. And there was a moment in the film where my character just burst into a moment's rage, sitting at a desk. And Oliver chose to cut away from that burst. And when I asked him why, he said, "Oh, I wanted a little piece of Eli in that shot." He wasn't wrong. He was looking at it from his perspective. Mm-hmm. I was looking at it from the inner life of my character, and I wanted the audience to see him explode. So I loved working with Oliver. I didn't think he was undermining me. I just thought he wasn't seeing the most important thing I saw, which is now why I rarely watch movies anymore that I'm in, because I don't want to hate the editor. I don't want to get upset with it. Better to wait a while. What do you advise other actors to do to ensure that the intent of their character makes it to the screen? You only have one thing as an actor. Only one, nothing else. Now, a few actors who are in the star quality, way up there, the ones who can command giant salaries and whose name means a film, get everything they want. Right or wrong, they get everything they want, often to their detriment. But if you're not one of those, which is the majority of us, you have only this one thing. You have you and the marriage of you and your character. And for that, you must fight, fight, fight as strongly as you can. We go back to the other thing of not wanting to be popular. But more important than that, why do it if you're not doing it for belief in your character and for the skill and the craft of acting? Why do it? Now, a lot of actors will say, well, I need to get my kids through school. And other actors say, I took the part because it's near a golf course. There's so many excuses an actor can give. Why should I not do it? If they pay me a fortune, I'd rather do that than do something else. It just happens not to be my modus operandi. I feel as if I have one thing only, and that's my talent as an actor to present to an audience. So I will fiercely fight to protect that. What are you looking for in a co-star to help both your performance, their performance in the film? Well, you're looking first for trust, very much for trust. Look, we're actors. We're insecure. We're frightened. We're greedy. We see things through the eyes of our character. We're competitive. When you get into a room with a new group of actors, the first thoughts that go through your head are, am I going to have trouble with this one? Are we going to fight? Are we going to sleep together? Are we going to become friends? Are we going to be enemies? It's just like normal life, except it's like you're putting it into a camera. And when you run into an actor or an actress where you feel a tremendous sense of trust and respect and mutual agreement on things, it's wonderful. But when it's clear to you after a while that you're going to be up against somebody who only wants to steal a scene, not reveal a scene, or only wants to have something that's in their best light or is out to compete in a way, then you have to be strong and on your guard and protect and self-protective. The films in which I have performed, I would say the percentage of really difficult actors is small in relationship to the number of films I've done. And I'm perfectly willing to believe, were you interviewing another actor, they would say, I had a terrible time with Langella. He drove me crazy. It's the nature of the game.
Talk us through some. You've talked a bit about how Alan Bates was one of your favorite co-stars. What was it about that relationship that still stays with you to this day?
The man's extraordinary heart and extraordinary talent. Let's start there. He was a joy to be on stage with, really. Not a shy, retiring wallflower by any means, and not someone who just handed it over to you. You had to toe-to-toe with Alan, which I loved doing every night. Alan was always willing to search for something, always willing afterwards when we'd go out for dinner very often. How did the scene go today, tonight? Well, you got to laugh there. I did this. We were always trying to find ways to improve it. And a belief, as I believe, that the better the actor is across from you, the better you will be. And one of the reasons I think Trial of Chicago 7 has turned out as well as I'm told it has, is because there were 12 or 14 of us out to do that, out to appreciate each other, work with each other, bounce off each other, share. You know, many years ago, I made a movie with Laurence Olivier, and he was a wonderful old English gent, and really difficult man, very difficult, but in a way I enjoyed. And one night he said to me at supper, you know, Franke, the most wonderful thing is an ensemble. And I laughed right in his face because Larry was not an ensemble actor by any means. He was a give it to me guy. He was my light, my time, my moment. And I laughed at him and I said, I don't believe you. Why? And I said, well, because you're a star actor and all star actors want to be in the limelight all the time. And it's difficult for them to share. And he looked me in the eye and said, oh, I see. You're a monster, just like me. And I said, yes, to a degree. But this particular experience, which will never come again, was 12 or 14 actors in an extraordinary ensemble feeling every day, every moment of the movie we made. This movie reminds me of the joy of watching something like 12 Angry Men, which had 10 or 12 actors in a room every day. Sidney Lumet's, one of Sidney Lumet's greatest films. In that sense, Larry was right. In the sense that we are there to help each other. We are there to support each other. We are there to have each other's backs. We're not there to try to cut each other down or cut in or hurt the other one. We're not there to display our own expertise at the expense of someone else. Often actors can go their whole lives and nobody will see it. But the greatest joy for me has been the experiences I've had with actors like that. Actors who want desperately to be good and want you to be good.
I remember reading about the Laurence Olivier's talking to you about an ensemble cast and in your memoir, but I was wondering, when was the first time that you appreciated that advice? Was there a film that you were like, oh, I finally understand it now?
Well, this is an interesting question because it goes back to what is it that young actors, why you want to be an actor and what it is that drives you to it. Every actor within the sound of my voice will understand when I say I felt desperately unsettled as a young boy growing up. I felt as if I didn't belong. that I was somehow born into a family that found me in a cabbage patch. I had nothing in common. I couldn't speak to people without my hands sweating. I was nervous all the time and scared, which I covered with a sense of humor and jokes. And that somewhat unhealthy drive is what can cause in the early days of your career some of the stuff I just complained about that actors shouldn't be, which is you want the limelight, you want to shine, you want the last call, you want to be the best. And you're not always tactful, and you're not always considerate, and you're not always vulnerable in the right way. When you get to be my age, you actually put yourself in the other person's place far more often than you did when you were younger. So that if an actor is behaving in a certain way, I try very hard before I go into my own problem to think what that actor is scared of or frightened of or wants. And I try to make it possible for both of us. I wasn't always that way when I was younger. I would get on my horse when they had their horse. And now, all of us riding together in this movie was a great example of, to me, what can be accomplished. You also have to have a director who wants that. There are directors like Elia Kazan who like to play actors off against each other. They think it creates a more exciting set. I couldn't be more wrong. I couldn't disagree more with that feeling. He's wrong in that, I think. That's happens to be the personality of a manipulative man. If you get up in the morning and you go to the set and you feel safe that the actor sitting next to you in the makeup chair wants what you want, you will have a better day and a better performance. But since actors have been called babies, and I agree, most of us are babies, it's similar to the feeling of when you wake up in your crib. Is Daddy going to pick me up? Is Mommy going to kiss me and hug me? Is she going to tell me I'm her favorite? Or I'm going to get yelled at or hit for things I don't understand. Actors carry that into their decision to be actors. But if you have any ability to grow and evolve and change, you discover that the craft of acting is something to be very proud of and to be very, to guard very carefully. And I think, and I hope you become a more generous actor yourself. It's like, so you get a moment in a scene where you steal something or rob it or, do something clever. What's that about? It's a Pyrrhic victory. You're losing the war by trying to gain. I mean, I've had actors do the most outrageous things in order to take a moment that is useless to the scene or the film or to their relationship with the other actor. It's maybe it's coming from my age now that I feel this way.
That does remind me of working, I believe it was on Wrath of God with Robert Meacham. You talked about how when you were riding your horse to him up to the church, he was throwing obscenities at you instead of the lines, and that was testing you. I'm not sure if I have a follow-up question for that, but it does remind me of that test where, is that something you had to face a lot when you were a young and up-and-coming actor?
Yes, very much so. I grew up in an era, I started in 1960, when the great, great stars were still working, like Robert Mitchum, Clark Gable, Loretta Young, Garbo. I knew who they were. I went to see their movies, and I loved Bob Mitchum. The day I worked on that movie, the first day, the word was he's a New York actor. He can't ride a horse. And oh God, he takes it all so seriously. And this is just a crappy Western. So I knew when I got on my horse uncomfortably, I also knew I couldn't hold a gun in any way that looked believable. A champagne glass would have been easier, but my gun like this and trying to hold on to my horse. And every line I said that was in the script, Bob said, "What now, motherfucker?" And then something else. Really, I mean, he just tested me like crazy. So I instantly knew that I had to that day show the man that I was more interested in getting it right than in pleasing him or laughing with the crew. That was probably now that you ask it, probably one of the most difficult days of my career, was making a split decision that I would rather lose Mitchum's, and I adored him and admired him. I'd rather lose his connection than let him get away with it. Well, the moral of that is that the moment all of the taunting was over, the moment we finished the scene and he stopped calling me names and the crew stopped laughing, the director said, "Well, all right, I think that's it. Let's go home. We'll shoot it tomorrow." And Mitch said, "No, let's do it again." And I went back. I didn't want to go back on my horse, but I did. I went back on my horse and I held my gun like this and I rode on, and he was impeccable. He was superb. That was more his genre than mine. I wasn't very good in that movie. But he knew every line by heart and delivered every one of them and honorably played a scene with me. We never discussed it. He never came over and said, "Gee, I shouldn't have treated you that way." And I never said, "Thanks for playing the scene right." Now another actor might have just gone home and said, "I'll get him tomorrow." But Mitch wanted me to be good. And he gave up on it, never did it again. Not once.
You had the pleasure of either knowing or working with a lot of great actors over the course of your career, especially early on. I think that was something that I was struck by in your memoir, these luminaries that you saw maybe towards the latter half of their career. What are some of the biggest lessons that you learned by watching them that you apply now?
Oh, I think the biggest lesson I learned from those miraculous people, I was lucky. I came in 1960, which was the beginning of the end of real stars and real stardom. And the actor I most admired and wanted to be like was someone I could never even come close to being like, was Clark Gable. He was everything in a man I wanted to be and wasn't. But here's probably the most important thing I've learned. Everyone, not some, everyone is not their image. Everyone has created an image by which they live, and in some cases earns them millions of dollars. But once you understand that, we're just men and women, and everybody has baggage and brings it to them, and what people want more than anything in the world is to be validated. Once you understand that if you can say a few words of validation to someone on a set, before or after, you're not lessening yourself by doing that. You're not putting yourself in a lower position and kissing up. And you find something genuinely honest and good to say. The harshest, most difficult, most stubborn of actors will melt a little bit and realize that you're not out to get them. You're not out to harm them. That's one thing they taught me. The other thing I'm very grateful for was discipline, integrity. You came every day and you knew your lines and you knew what they meant and you tried to mean them when you say them. You didn't take a cell phone out of your pocket between takes. You didn't say, "Let's wrap this up. I want to go home and play golf." These people, no matter how famous they were, they had their moments, but they were dedicated to the. Remember, I grew up in an era where the first day of rehearsal, the women wore white gloves and hats with a little veil on them and beautiful, elegant suits, two-piece suits. And the guys often had ties with jackets on and sometimes vests and fedoras. It was another era. It was a time in life where not only acting, not only the profession I was in, was treated with a lot more respect, when everything was. Everything. We're in an extraordinarily dangerous time now. And we're also in a period when to be qualified is lower on the list of things needed to become famous. You don't have to be qualified anymore to be a great actor. You just have to be an actor.
To that point, what do you wish newer actors or modern actors could learn from the era that you entered in? What is missing?
What is missing now?
Yes.
Well, I think what's missing, and I'll tell you in a moment, comes from how difficult it is to be a young actor today starting out. It's always difficult, but it wasn't as difficult for me. I started out in New York in 1960 in a much more civilized world and a much more civilized profession. And I did 9 off-Broadway shows, 22 on Broadway, about 60 plays all over the country, and then movies. So I had a ongoing testing ground. I was in a play all the time. I was traveling to Williamstown or the Berkshires or out to California. I was working at my skill constantly every day and every night. And I never made any decisions based on, will this be good for my career? Nor did I have what is laughingly known now as a team. No actor just, I have one agent and I have one manager. I'm covered in that profession. I'm totally covered. I don't have to worry. But the word team is used all the time, and I feel badly for young actors. You shouldn't have a team. You should find a person who believes in you, and then occasionally you have to use other elements. But saying that you have a team automatically puts a pressure on you that you don't need. My manager says, my business manager says, my agent says, my publicist says, my makeup person says. You're walking around, first of all, giving away an enormous amount of your salary and loading people on like barnacles on a ship. You should know what it is you want. And you should remember that you're the 100% from which they take 10. It's not the reverse. And I think young actors today rely on other people too much to tell them this is the right move, do this, do that. And remember, many of the people working for actors want a tennis court or a pool or want to be in the upper echelon where other stars are. They're not always advising you for the betterment of your career and yourself. They're advising you sometimes for the betterment of turning over an enormous profit. And believe me, when your career starts to go downhill as a result of that advice, they have somebody waiting in the wings, ready to take your place. They've made all the money they're going to make from you. You're on the slide. They'll take him. And they'll say something like, I'm not so sure you shouldn't go somewhere else. I think you'll be happier. All of that stuff that is geared to make you go, I guess it's my fault.
Yeah. I was going to say, just a lot of what you're saying reminds me a bit of your character, Harry Crystal, in Those Lips, Those Eyes. What was interesting about that, and I felt it was very close to your time at the Cape Playhouse in Dennis, Massachusetts. It, at least to me, since I had been reading your memoir and watching this movie very closely after, it felt the most biographical to you. It felt close to who you were. And also, I think, to your some of the points that you've made, your view on acting, that you don't do it just because it'll make you rich or you'll become famous. It's about the craft, that you do these things because it's inside you and you need to do it. To that point, has there ever been a role that you've taken specifically because it speaks to your own experiences, to your life, to something that's inside you?
Yeah, pretty much every part I play, I have to find a good reason to do it. When I was younger and married several times and had children, sometimes I had to do a terrible movie to pay for the private schools or whatever the particular financial problems were. But I tried to gear my life to not having to take something because I couldn't pay the mortgage. I've always tried to stay ahead of that. But if you want specifics, I did 2 independent films 10 years ago, Starting Out in the Evening and Robot and Frank, which are characters I felt very connected to. But I don't do it if I don't feel some connection in some way. Of course, I don't want to be unrealistic, and I don't want to sit on some ridiculous pedestal saying, not just do it for the art, dear. That's ridiculous. People have to eat and they have to live. But look, there's something here that has always, always troubled me. A talented young actor says to me, I've been offered a terrible, terrible, terrible series. Awful. It's about aliens landing in balloons in Monaquis, Texas, and we have to fight them. And the undead come in to help us fight them. And I say, well, that's just crap, isn't it? And they go, yeah, I guess it is. But you know what? If I do that and make a lot of money and become famous, then I can do anything I want. And it is the absolute worst way to think. It's the opposite. You must try constantly to do quality, to do absolutely wonderful quality things. And if you have the goods, so to speak, it will come round to you. It may not come round every time, and you may find long stretches where you're not working at all. But to say that I'll do this because it'll make me famous and make me rich, and then I can do anything I want is ridiculous, because if you do that piece of crap and it runs for 4 or 5 years, you're like the dog's dinner. You know, they don't want you after that because you've developed a reputation for being easy to have, easy to get, and doing bad work. Now, you'll get a lot of actors watching this and saying, oh, well, easy for him. He's 82 and he's on the, close to the final years of his career. But you're just not going to sleep well. You're not. What have you got? You've only got this one life. Why not do in it the things that garner respect and honor, to use your word, and a great sense of pleasure at night when you go back to your hotel room and you've turned in what you think is a good piece of work, or you've gotten an audience to weep, or more importantly, you've gotten them to laugh. I mean, what else is life about if you don't do the work you believe in the way you want to do it, and you don't have love in your life? I know these are terrible cliches, but they're true. They really are. There are only 2 things: work and love. That's all you got.
How did you realize what your strength was as an actor?
Well, I didn't know it for a long time. I really didn't. I only had passion. I only had something that woke me up in the middle of the night and it made me want to do it. I have so many instances of that in my young life where I didn't understand what it was. I just knew that there's an expression, burning bright. I was burning bright to work at something meaningful, So I did Moliere and Shaw and Shakespeare and Tennessee Williams and Arthur Miller and Edward Albee. And I just always wanted to do great writers in great material in roles I could play over the centuries. And I discovered that I had a particular gift for wanting to play epic characters, larger than life, people wrestling with enormous obstacles. I loved those kinds of characters. And that I wasn't particularly good at doing the everyday regular guy thing. It's just, I'm just not a regular guy. You know, I don't think I look good in a check shirt and a t-shirt, you know, and I don't think I'm very good at, yeah, man, okay, sure. It's not me. I'm, as you can tell, I'm nauseatingly verbal, and I love great writing, and I love to be gifted with a King Lear or a Trepleff or Judge Hoffman or Richard Nixon or any number of the parts that I've played. It's a joyous thing to be an actor. And it's a joyous thing to have made it to 82 years old and still be practicing this craft and not have too many things behind me that I wish I hadn't done. And even the ones that were terrible, I did a movie. Well, The Wrath of God was a horrible movie. The Wrath of God is aptly named. And I did another movie called Sphinx, and another movie called.
I did watch that as well.
Oh, my condolences. And you have to get through those as best you can, and you have to go home and pay your bills. But as little of them as you can do, I would advise actors to. I know, look, this may sound a bit self-serving, but I was doing a play in New York many years ago, and an extraordinarily famous actor walked into my dressing room and said a nice thing to me. And then he sat down and he said, "Oh man, I wish I had your career." And I say, "Well, you can stop buying horses. Sell your 12-room apartment on Fifth Avenue. Go back to the basics of why you wanted to be an actor in the first place." I'm not aggrandizing myself, not at all. I'm saying that when you become more in love with your toys, you know, he had a fleet of horses, he had a private plane, he had everything that's supposed to look good and feel good. And he's saying he wanted my humble little career as a serious actor. And I say, you can have it. It just means you won't make millions, you won't have horses, you won't have a penthouse. But those things ultimately are very unrewarding because you're sitting in the penthouse or riding that horse, disrespecting yourself, not liking yourself because you know you're doing something that is quite beneath you or something for a reason that has nothing to do with that thing that went through your mind the very first time you decided this is going to be my profession. I remember when I was 6 years old, I had no idea about anything in my life at all. And the school principal came in and said, we're doing an operetta called Lazy Town. Who wants to be in it? And I went like that. And then I looked at my hand and I said, oh, I guess that's what I want to do. And she said, go down to the auditorium. And I went to the auditorium and I stood in line. And then I walked up some steps and suddenly I was on a raised platform that was called a stage, a word I'd never heard before. And then I was told to go wait in the wings, a word I'd never heard before. And then I learned where stage left was and stage right was and how to get a follow spot and all of those things. And I knew for the rest of my life I had found a calling, not in a grand way at all, but God, how lucky was I? Because I was absolutely awful at everything else. I know there are actors out there who are going to identify with this. I couldn't do anything else well. I was never chosen to play on the baseball team. My brother was. I wasn't as good looking in my mind. I had a beautiful young sister. I couldn't speak well with people. I was nervous. I was scared. I was insecure. I had big, thick, high horn rimmed glasses and spiky hair. I was a nerd, an absolute nerd. But when I walked out on that platform and those wings and began to play other characters, I found my calling and I found the place I was meant to be. Now, then after that, you can go through a period where all of those extras become very important to you. Well, now I'm making money and now people are willing to go to bed with me. They never were before. And I do have enough money and and I'm starting to get recognized on the street and all of those things. And you should be in love with that for a while. It's a lot of fun. It really is. There's going to come a day when there's a wonderful line in a movie, I can't remember what it is, that one day life is going to present you with a bill. And depending upon how you've spent it, you're going to find it difficult to pay. So in these years, life is sending me bills. And I feel basically okay about being able to pay them. But there are some I'll never be able to pay, some deep and profound mistakes and regrets.
Something that you had mentioned the Sphinx, and while that movie wasn't, it is a movie, it is certainly a film, but your co-star, John, I'm going to probably butcher his name, John Gielgud, he did give you some very prescient advice. And I think that's something that's been paying forward to talking about paying bills. I'm going to quote it here. He said, "Someday you're not going to be pretty any longer, and you are not going to be offered leading roles. Take the smaller ones, but only on one condition. Make certain they're effective." When you got that advice, did you appreciate it at the time? And how is it guiding you now?
No, I didn't appreciate it at the time, because at the time I was somewhat of a leading man in movies, never a big star, but I had reached a certain arena. So what you read beautifully, but what left out was that I stupidly said to John, "What are you doing here? What do you come all the way to Egypt for to play 2 scenes in a movie?" He was the great Gielgud. That's when he gave me the advice. What he said prior to the advice is, "I've come here to be garroted by your leading lady."
Yes.
You get his throat slit. So no, I didn't understand completely, because I honestly believed I would be young forever and I would be in this position forever. It's the biggest mistake anybody makes, never mind an actor. When it became, one of the things I decided to do when I wrote my book about all of these people was to only write the things I remembered, not to search for stuff, but what came out of me. And when that came out of me, I thought, oh, I remember that story, because I'm now where John was. I'm older in a way. He was probably in his early 70s when he said that. And what I took from it was, can I land in this part? Is it something where I can have a few moments, not the whole movie, not the star title and all of that stuff, but is there something in this role that I can connect to and land with? And that's how I felt about Chicago 7, that I could connect with the judge, that I could find a way, having played a number of unscrupulous men, that I could find a way to do it. And it's joyful to do. It really is.
I think that's also really good advice for any actor of any age, because there are actors that I've come to love, but they're stronger in smaller roles. They're stronger in coming in, doing something effective, and that builds a better career than being the marquee name sometimes.
It actually builds a longer career.
It's true.
If you're a marquee name, you can't be one for, back in the day, I talk about the actors that I admired, Clark Gable and Gary Cooper. They were marquee names for 30 or 40 years in an era when all the audience wanted to do was watch you do what you do. I feel very badly for young actors now. You can't have, I say this with complete modesty, not ego, you can no longer have the sort of career I've had. You know, all of those Broadway plays and off-Broadway and certain kinds of films. The poor young actor today is thrown on the junk heap after one or two failures. The hottest young 25-year-old is old news when the new 21-year-old comes in. And just look at the magazine covers on People and look at who the hottest thing was that month, that year, and you don't even know where they are anymore. It's a very dangerous thing to want to be the thing of the moment, because like everything else, the moment goes, good and bad. You win something, you get up, you say, thank you for this award. And seconds later, you're in the wings and someone else is getting one. It just comes and goes. To live for that, it's great to get them, but to live for it is to me the death of, there's a wonderful expression, I've been using it very often, so if I've done it before, forgive me, but it really rang true to me. It's from Heartbreak House, written by George Bernard Shaw. The line is, life has a way of slipping through your fingers, but if you stick to your soul, it will stick to you.
Yeah.
I think it's great. I think it means exactly what it should mean. You're going to lie in a bed one day, hopefully not in terrible pain, but you're going to die, and you're going to be pretty much alone, whether or not there's love around you or not. You're still going to go through that experience by yourself, the way you left that wonderful, warm, sweet, bubbly place inside your mother and came out into the world. You left and came from safety into a world you'd have no way of knowing how you'd survive. And when you're coming to the end of it, it might not be a bad thing to have lived a life in which you haven't crowded it. You know, Eastern religion says that Westerners, you're born and you're an empty box, and Westerners, every time they feel nervous or scared or vulnerable, they go buy a house or a car, or they get laid, or they drink, or they make money, and they keep stuffing their box with things that they need in order to get through life. And they say, so by the time you get ready to go, you're walking around with a box so full of things you didn't need in the first place. And their philosophy is, every time you feel a tremble, every time you're scared or frightened or unsure of yourself, throw something out of your box. Throw the thing out that you think you need, you know, antidepressants or whatever it is, painkillers or smoking or booze or sex or whatever. Don't throw that out. But throw those things out that absolutely impede you, that you think you need. You don't. And you don't need a team either. You just don't.
Something you mentioned reminded me of something you said earlier the previous time we talked about how you've used fear to guide you in the roles that you've taken, whether it be Nixon or even to a degree Dracula. There are roles that you've taken because you're scared of them. Talk a little bit about that. I think that's something that a lot of actors, both young and old, need to hear, that it's not just the thing they think they're right for, but something that might they might struggle with?
Well, the best example I can give you of that is Richard Nixon. And the circumstances which led to it, I think, are good for actors to hear. This doesn't happen often in an actor's career, but it was happening in mine. And there were years and years of no employment and nobody wanting my services. But that particular year, I was offered a 1-hour television show, about a lawyer or something. And I was offered a half-hour comedy called Ugly Betty.
Yep.
And a phone call came from the director of Frost Nixon saying, would you like to read a script? We'd like you to come to London and play it. And I said to my agent, do you think that the TV show will let me do 1 episode pilot to see if I like doing it and not tie me on and on and on, because I think this is something interesting in this play. And they said, let's find out. And then they went to Ugly Betty people, and I said, I can't commit to you for 6 years. And they said, well, fuck you. We're not, if we can't own you, we don't want you. So that went away. And the other series, happened to be on a network where the president of that network was very fond of me. And he said, let's take Langella for a pilot. He's not somebody who's going to kill us later. So I did that pilot. It went away. Anyway, I decided to do the play, totally and completely sure that I was going to have a great, great failure, because I could not imagine Nixon being in my bag. And I went to London, and it was 8 weeks at a ridiculously low, whatever the salary was. And it was agony for 4 of those weeks. I had the same thing with Dracula. I could not find Nixon. I sounded like Mr. Magoo or Jimmy Stewart. Well, if you don't have fear like that, if you're not literally trembling with that fear, you're never going to grow, you're never going to improve, and you're never going to risk. And I couldn't get him, and I couldn't get him. And finally, one day, as a result of that part isn't important, I got him. But all during the period when I was looking for him, I wasn't thinking I lost a major television series, or I should have been in Ugly Betty. I was thinking, this risk is going to make me better. This leaping into the void empty-handed is going to improve me if I can ever find him. And if I do or I don't, it's only going to be 8 weeks in a little theater in the West End. Well, you know what happened. Both of those shows went away. It played a little theater, then it played the West End, then it played Broadway. I've told this story before, even I'm bored with it. And then it became a movie. And I won all sorts of things and lost all sorts of things. My point is, risk, absolutely risk. Jump off the cliff, dive into the deepest water, embrace the fear. You'll be better for it, even if, by the way, you fail. Because risk is challenging you. Risk is making you go places you're terrified to go to. And if you take the easy money in a series, okay, everybody has, their horses and their cars and whatever they need. But then don't expect at the end of your career that you're necessarily going to like your choices. There's this wonderful singer, Beyonce,
Yeah.
Anyway, she got a little bit of flack for not singing live at the inauguration of Obama, but lip syncing.
Yeah.
And she deserved the flack she got because she said, well, it was a windy day and it was cold and I didn't want to risk it. Well, what the hell are you singing for? She's a great singer and a wonderful, fabulous presence. And she was up there in front of the president and millions of people mouthing a song. How much more exciting it would have been if she'd risked it. She wouldn't have. She would have been great. She is great. But risk it. Try. So the wind is against you. So the weather's not so hot. That makes you work harder. That makes you more determined to be good. Take the high road. There's no traffic, just do that.
This is, I'm trying to think how to phrase this. When you're offered script, when you're looking at scripts, what are you looking for? It's not, obviously you want that risk, you want that challenge, but what is it that you're looking for, whether it be your character or the story overall? What are you looking for?
Oh, well, I'm looking for the Bible to be great. I'm looking for the words first. Do I want to say these words? Can I say them? Are they challenging? Are they exciting? And as I said before, I'm a lucky duck because when I started in 1960, I played all the great classical writers for 10, 20 years, and then all the modern writers for another. So first with me, it's the words. It's the words and the character and what I think I can do with the character. The rest of the things are there in my mind, but I try not to make them as important as that. Can I say it? Can I do it? And on the occasion I just told you about, is this a great role that I'm frightened to do? And it was clear the moment I read Nixon that it was brilliantly written by Peter Morgan and that I should risk it.
You talk a little bit about the different methods of acting. There's method acting, and you studied under Stella Adler for a short period of time.
No, I didn't. I just knew her.
You knew her. I apologize. But what were the biggest lessons in the time that you knew her that still stay with you today?
Well, Stella and I became friends when I was fairly late in my career. As if this isn't late. I was younger in my career, but probably 15 or 20 years ago, I gave her an award. And the day after I gave her the award, I'd never met her except that night. A blue card arrived in an envelope, hand-delivered, saying, "You will come and see me at 5 o'clock next Tuesday. You will not be late." So I got there, even though my car ran out of gas, going downhill, and I was able to get to a gas station. And I, in my book, I wrote, I could smell her perfume in the driveway, But when I first came to New York, I took an acting class from a wonderful man who's just died, called Win Hanman. And I was only in it for 6 months because I realized I just didn't want to carry my props to somebody else's apartment and work on scenes. I wanted to get on a horse and gallop. So I started going around to non-equity off-Broadway theaters and regional theaters. But years and years before I ever met Stella, I learned what I think we've been talking about a lot, if there's a theme to our meeting today. I learned that in work, there is honor. In work, there is a sense of self. In work, there comes validation. Validation is probably the thing most people want in this life. People will tell you, I want to love and be loved. That's true. But most people want to be validated. So you want to do things that help you validate yourself, that make you feel good about yourself. And I learned, often the hard way, to fight the need to be more famous or to be wealthier or to be the hottest thing. I learned that very young, or at least I embraced it very young. And I began with a group of actors who all became far more famous than me, far quicker than me. And sometimes I would go, oh. But then I thought, well, it's just my path. My path is not their path. And I have to travel it. I pay a great price when I do really bad stuff. Mm-hmm. Luckily, I haven't done a lot of it. I'm not saying I'm better. I'm just saying I don't know how they do it sometimes, but I just can't. The price is too high for me to pay. So I'd rather have less of the perks and more of the feeling of, God, that was, I didn't know where the trial of the Chicago 7 was going to go. I had no idea. Hopefully actors will listen to me when I say I had not worked for 1 solid year prior to Aaron's call. I never met Aaron. I didn't know anything about the project. I got the script and that little boing went off. And then we met and talked about it. And it's probably the biggest hit I've ever been in. You know, it's just nothing to do with me. But if you can stay at the table, and if you cannot complain when you pick up 2s, but stay, you will one day pick up aces. Stay in the game, have the courage to wait it out. Probably the single most difficult thing for an actor is waiting.
Yeah.
And lots of actors can't do it. They just take what's there, even though they hate it or hate themselves for it. I make no judgment about it. It all is dependent upon how much you can live with and how much you can live without. But if you're not at peace with yourself about the work you do or choose to do, it's not such a great life, in my humble opinion.
I will admit that is very similar to my own outlook on life. So I completely agree. There was something that I remember reading in your book that struck me, and it was your conversation with Paul Newman. There was a performance that he saw of you, and he asked you about the anger that you presented on stage. And I don't recall this show that he was talking about, but you talked about how you use anger to find your characters that like seep into your role. Can you just tell us a little bit about that conversation and how you use anger in your characters?
Well, I was very, very fond of Paul, and that conversation was had in the dark parking lot of that theater in New Haven, and I can't remember it right now. And it was after he'd come and seen me in a production called Booth. And he said to me, where do you get all that anger from? Because the character had many displays of it. And I said, I don't know entirely. But I know it's there, of course, from my childhood. And I said to him, well, how do you feel about that? He said, I don't want to go near mine. I can't go near mine. It's more than I can actually talk about. So he obviously felt interested in the fact that I could display it. You know, the angriest people in the world are comics.
Yeah.
They are raged. They're all of them. Everyone I've ever met or worked with, from Robin Williams to any number. I'm trying to think of only dead ones because I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. But there's a fury in comics, absolute rage in them. And they are hysterically funny. From some of them aren't, but most comics are terribly, terribly angry people. And I don't think you can do the brilliance of their comedy without that anger that sort of propels you. Anger is either something that is going to destroy your life, or you're going to use it creatively to make your life better. The only thing that stops you in this profession is fear, giving into fear. Giving into anger is not so bad if you do it creatively and construct it and make it art. But when you let fear overtake you, when you let fear stop you, you're lost. When you take the safe road, you're lost. Jump, run. It's also fun, but it's so rewarding.
One thing that also came out that I was struck by in reading your memoir was your opinions on Lee Strasberg and the method acting. What about that specific style of acting doesn't appeal to you?
Well, it's masturbation. Not that doesn't appeal to me, but it's masturbation.
Okay.
Do what you feel, do what you want. How does that affect what you were as a child? Did you see the flower? And Lee was a total fake. I mean, but the method was all. The real method, he said, was Stanislavski. But Stanislavski didn't say what Lee said. Stanislavski said, translate your own feelings and take them and mold them into art. Create, so you can do a Shakespeare play or a Molière or a Shaw, so you know the style of those writers and you can fit yourself into it. Lee Strasberg promoted the idea of being self and muzzling around in your own neurosis. My teacher in college said a great thing to me: act in spite of this, not because of it. And that's what I think Lee promoted. He was a very self-serving, greedy, self-important man, I felt had hurt the American actor. And all of the actors who came out of the actor's studio would have been great anyway. They didn't need Lee. He mind-fucked a lot of people, a lot. And other teachers will tell you that Stella Adler said to me, he set back the American actor for 100 years. It'll take all that time to get rid of the malarkey. And Arthur Miller hated him, and Stella hated him, and Brando said he never taught me a thing, not a thing, and he tries to make believe I'm the student. And maybe the person who did benefit most was Marilyn, because I thought she was a great actress, never mind her physical sex appeal. Her performance in The Misfits is absolutely beautiful, using some of the things he said, but no, not my style.
Speaking of Arthur Miller, and I had asked about this earlier, but one story that stood out to me was your working relationship with Arthur Miller on After the Fall. Tell us a little bit about that play and what it was like working with Arthur, because it sounds like a very unique experience, specifically working with a writer who's working on a project that's very autobiographical.
Well, it was an original experience, and it had a history in my life. In 1961 or 2, I was part of the Lincoln Center training program.
Yep.
Elia Kazan won it, and Bobby Lewis was the teacher, and Arthur had given them his play After the Fall to open Lincoln Center. It was the first to be done at a place called the Anta while they were building the other one. And I was chosen by Arthur and by Kazan, really, to be the little guy who sat in the room while all the actors of the day came in to read for that play, which is a play everybody wanted to be in. Everybody wanted to play the leading guy and the Marilyn Monroe character. So I sat and watched the readings of young actresses of the day, beautiful, talented, read. And I didn't understand the play. I didn't understand the problem of the leading man. I subsequently played it 50 years later, and boy, did I understand it. But then I had no idea. That play came and went. It was not successful. Many, many years, maybe 30, I was in another down nadir, and I read the play again, and I thought, well, I'm now the right age to play Quentin. So I called Arthur, who lives up close here, not anymore. He's gone. And I said, what would you think if I optioned this play? Yeah, sure, go ahead. I mean, that was all it took, because Arthur had never had any success with it. And if somebody wanted to do it, as far as he was concerned, it was good for him. And understand the problems of Quentin. And I came to know Arthur very, very well. And I came to see what he couldn't face. He simply couldn't face his culpability in the Maryland situation. He could not face it. He was a very interesting and challenging writer to play. Not as easy as Tennessee, because Arthur tended to pontificate and tended to stray from the core of his play, which was the self-guilt of his relationship with Marilyn Monroe. And no matter how many times I tried to get him there and say, could you write me a speech in which the character has some sense of self? And he'd say, well, why don't we bring the mother in there about him? He just couldn't get there. So I suggested that at some point in the play, Marilyn's character come up and slap him across the face. And he said, why? I said, well, I think somebody should. Somebody has to feel what the audience is feeling, which is stop being so pompous about what you do. But Arthur wouldn't have it. He just wouldn't have it. And he was funny. He was great to be with, never paid a check in the 3 or 4 years we went out to a dinner, never picked up one fucking check. Never. You know, his nickname was God when he was a kid. That's what his family called. What did we expect?
I always find that funny, the God line, because he went to my high school in Brooklyn, and someone went into the archives of the school. It was Abraham Lincoln High School, to see, like, did someone know he was Arthur Miller? And one English professor gave him a B. Everything else was failing. So I always find it funny that the God, that everyone called him God, because, like, he just basically failed out of my high school. I think one thing that your interactions with Arthur tie into some of the stuff that we talked about earlier on in this conversation about being unpopular, fighting for the belief of the character. What advice would you give to an actor who's working with a writer? Doesn't matter if they're Arthur Miller level, any actor working with any writer on finding the character. How should they approach it?
Well, if the actor has the privilege to sit with the writer, he should be doing for the writer what he himself wants the director to do for him, elucidating the character he's written, finding a way to talk about this character in service of the play, not in service of, as I said earlier, his own neuroses. Give me a big speech here. I need to bring the house down there. All of them are legitimate needs for actors. But if you're lucky enough to get a script in front of you that the writer is alive and wants, most of the time they don't really want it. Most of the time the writer wants you to do exactly what he wrote and isn't very open to your ideas. But your job is to service the play and to try to avoid an egocentric point of view, which is, will this make me look good? Is that a great speech? All of which you have a perfect right to use. But we go back to something we said a long time back. Collaboration is it. If you're able to collaborate with a writer and help him make a better play and a better character, you'll be okay.
Was there ever a collaboration that you look back upon as the gold standard for your experiences as an actor?
With a writer?
With anyone.
Well, first is Alan Bates, who was my most adored co-star. I had a wonderful collaboration with him. There have been so many co-stars over the years that I've had great times with. I can't even at the moment come up with them. As far as writers and directors go, I have good collaboration with directors who are willing to hear clearly and honestly what I think. And I say that to you because for the most part in this profession, actors who think and are reasonable and are trying to make a point are nowhere near as regarded as an actor who's a drunk and can't get himself on a set, or an actress who screams and yells about her hair and makeup. Because people can feel superior to those actors. You know, they can feel, oh, he's a drunk, oh, and I'm not, they can do that. But if you sit there and reasonably discuss what's needed, you terrify them. They don't know what to do. They don't want to hear it. They want you to be, you know, overly emotional, this or that, because then they can manipulate it and handle it and say to the producer, oh my God, he's a pain in the ass, you know, as opposed to, I had an experience years ago with a wonderful actress named Ida Lupino.
I was literally about to ask that. Yes.
She was the second woman to be in the Directors Guild. And she was a woman I had idolized as a young man. So when they told me she was going to play my mother, I was thrilled. In the first 3 days of rehearsal, she asked the most intelligent, cogent, interesting. I thought, oh, I can't wait to act with this woman. We were just reading it on the table and I was excited. And on the third day, she said to me, they're going to can me. They're going to fire me. And I said, oh, I'd be ridiculous. You're Ida Lupino, you're this, you're that. She said, no. And they did. They fired her the next day. And when I went to the director and asked him why, he said, we don't have time for her. So there's everything to be said in that sentence. We don't have time for talent. We don't have time for brains. We don't have time for vulnerable caring. But we have a lot of time to bring in a 50-foot rig and make sure it captures a long sweeping shot. We have a lot of time for the actress who's locked in her dressing room, drinking, and finding a way to get her out and prop her up. That we have time for. But for the reasonable, intelligent, gifted actor who cares, they're not as willing to do that.
Why do you think that is?
Money. It's totally about money.
Yeah.
You know, we got to get this done in 14 days. We're losing the other actor then, or, you know, the producers are on my neck. I've got to get this shot by 5 o'clock. Stop already. You're talking to me about a sensitive, delicate moment within your character, you selfish, self-involved person. When the selfish, self-involved person is the one drinking, or the one screaming, or the one walking out and locking himself in his dressing room. I have been on films in which the producers have waited 3 days for an actress to come out because she was upset about the color of her shoes or didn't think the director liked. They won't wait 3 minutes for an actor who wants to talk reasonably. And if you're the money in a movie, and she was the money, they have no choice but to wait for you. But just in general, actors take a lot of beating. You know, we all have problems and we all have difficulty getting through life, but actors, particularly in this profession, I'm sure that a lot of producers and directors, if they could figure out a way to do it without us, they'd do it. And then you add a brain to that, or a sensible, question and they're taking Valium.
What advice would you give then for an actor like yourself who wants to ask questions, who wants to explore the character in a situation that you've described? Like, how should they approach either director or producer, or just how should they act on set so that way they can explore the character the way they need to while not worrying about they don't have time for that?
Well, I would advise this: say less. Choose your moment. And if you have 8 questions, go for 2. And then keep your mouth shut. Don't talk a great deal about your inner life and what you feel and what you're going to try and all that stuff. Logically, see if you can get a couple of points across. And if you feel you're in a safe atmosphere, as I was with Aaron, you can do that. If you don't, then realize the circumstance you're in and don't fight it. Don't, oh, poor me, and I'm mad, and I'm this, and I'm that. And, you know, there was an actor offered a role in our movie who called Aaron and said, well, let's you and me talk about this and that. And Aaron isn't interested in that. He's not interested in, rightly so, going into the inner workings of an actor. He wants you to do your job. So this actor walked off the movie. And the actor who played the role is having a great success with it. Fight your own instincts. If you love the part and you love the production and you want to be in it, find a way to deal with it healthily and intelligently. Don't run to your trailer. Don't take a drink. Stand there and state your case. You're not responsible for how they're going to react to that. And at some point, if it's to your detriment, shut up. Keep your head down and do the best you can.
I feel like we've talked about this in a lot of ways, but what would you describe as your proudest achievement looking back on your career?
Oh, endurance.
Yeah.
Endurance. I can't point to I was good in this play or not. I've endured, and there's a beautiful speech in The Seagull from Nina, who is having a terrible time as an actress, says, now I know, I understand. It's not the fame. It's not the money. It's not the success. It's how to have faith and endure. And when I think of that, I'm not afraid. I'm not saying it well, but that's the essence of the speech. I don't know how I've managed. I really don't, because God knows I put enough obstacles in my own way. And God knows I didn't behave anywhere near as well as I do now, I think. But I forgive myself for that. I was young, incredibly insecure and frightened, and I acted on those things. It's why I know what I know now. But if you ask me for one thing, it's that I endured, that I'm still here, still trying to do the best work possible and make the best of it.
For an actor who's starting out, who hopes to have as long as a career as you have had, how would you advise them to find that endurance? What do they need to do to know that no matter how long the road is, no matter how difficult it becomes, to keep on fighting?
If you want to stay the course, decide early to fight for your beliefs in a reasonable, honest way, filled with integrity. If you jump down into the pit that is, unfortunately, the majority of our profession, people who behave badly, people who are not talented, who become successful, you'll be lost. Have the courage and the strength to maintain what your beliefs are Don't run with the pack. Try to be a horse for single harness. Try to remember that what's most important is in your profession. This can go to anybody, but in the acting profession, what's most important is, do they believe you every time you work? And are you feeling honored and trusted? I give master classes sometimes at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, and when I'm asked, what do you have to do to become an actor? I always say three things. Learn your lines, know what they mean, and mean them when you say them. As simple as that. First, you have to learn the lines, like a pianist has to do their, whatever that's called, rolls. And then you have to know what they mean. You have to know that, oh, that this two solid flesh means something. And once you understand what it means, then you have to say it in a way that makes the audience understand it. And in many, many years, in the beginning of your career, you're going to say, oh, I think I'll have curly hair in this part, or I want to wear this, or, I think I'll do a thing here and there. Eventually, it all goes away, and you come down to the very simple core. Do I know the lines? In other words, have I done the technical work required? Number two, do I understand every word I'm saying? Number three, can I say it with truth and honesty? If you can do those three things, you're an actor, and hopefully an actor people will want to watch and see. But anything else, all the dross around that is something young actors have to go through. I give a very wide berth to difficult young actors. I've worked with a lot of them, and I'm very in love with a lot of them, even when they don't necessarily behave the best, because I know what they're going through. If I believe they're out after the best, then I certainly patiently wait for them to go through whatever the problem is that they're having, because I can sense that they care. And unfortunately, there are a lot of actors who care desperately and can't get work. Yeah. And a lot of actors who are hacks who do get work. And make peace with that unfairness. Make peace with it early.
To that point, what are your hopes for the future of this industry, especially at such a very strange inflection point in the industry?
Well, my hopes are, as they are for the country, we're talking together 2 days before election. In one direction, if it goes in that direction, we are heading into a period of bleakness, in my opinion, and an authoritarian state. I've said this in other interviews, but I really believe it. This year, they came for our mailboxes.
Yep.
Next year, they're going to come for us.
Yep.
You say the wrong thing, you disagree, you'll be called a traitor, and you'll be arrested and thrown in jail. It's not so difficult to believe that our country, under an authoritative despot, will go into a horrible place. And in another direction, we'll be back to a certain degree of decency and humanity and compassion. It doesn't mean that there aren't going to be loads and loads of people who are still out to do not for the citizen. And to tie it up to the actor, there are three things you have as a citizen. You can boycott something that you don't like. Never go to that store again. Never buy that product again. You have that power. You can protest peacefully against what you believe is an injustice. And you can vote, which I did yesterday. Those three things give you power. And the average citizen doesn't understand that he outranks a president, a senator, a representative. He outranks them. He's a citizen, and he is a free and important member of society. And he has those weapons, and those weapons are far greater than anything an authoritarian can give you. And to take it to actors, know that if you have a gift, your greatest job in life is to protect it, to honor it, to make certain that you're doing nothing to lessen it. I often say that being an actor is like being a glitter ball at the prom, that they put up in the ceiling, and the glitter ball goes round and shoots lights on it. But as it's going around, a little bit of its dust, whatever that glitter is, begins to fall off of it. And if you are that glitter ball and you keep going round and round and round in directions you don't want to be, all that glitter is going to fall and be gone. Try to hold on to the thing you initially wanted to do, which is craft and skill. They're in short supply now, and there are too many wannabes and fakes who get very far. But don't do it to yourself. And don't be angry that they do. Just stay your own path and stay your own road.
As you've mentioned, we are recording this 2 days before the election. And I think something that you sort of touched upon, can get lost, is how important art is to speaking to climactic changes as we are in now. Bringing it back to the trial of the Chicago 7, what do you hope your role as Judge Hoffman and the film itself can speak to this moment, and why it's important, no matter how dark things might get, no matter how good things might get, the importance of the role of an actor in society and the importance of art in society?
Well, the importance, of course, is to bring the human experience into some kind of higher level of existence. I'm searching for my words here. Something that honors humanity, compassion and love and all of those things that everybody talks about. I think the most important thing that can happen for actors, as could be for the country, is to try to stay on the highest plane you can without calling it, without getting on a pedestal and saying, oh, I'm an artist. I don't like it when actors call themselves artists. I just think it's a pretentious word. Picasso was an artist. We are working people. Actors are workers. And try not to be, try not to get bitter, try not to get cynical, try not to join the whatever's the going thing that day. Make peace with who you are and what you are. And also celebrate everything about you that's wrong. Celebrate it. Don't try to get rid of it because you think it won't work in the current atmosphere. Everything about myself that everybody told me would stop me is what helped me. Everything. I was born with a condition called nystagmus, in which your eyes wobble. And I was told I'd never have a career. As a result of them, I'd never go on camera. And on the stage, those eyes wobbling, which I couldn't control, caught the light. So I get a review like, this magical eyes of this actor. I had nothing to do with it. And then as I got older, they calmed down. And in certain parts, they were marvelously appropriate, like Dracula. But celebrate everything that holds you back. Celebrate everything that makes you feel lonely and frightened and use it to your betterment rather than letting it destroy you. You'll always come out better if you fight your fear. I think the most important thing I can tell you, I think we're ending up now, is when I was about 22 or 23, I got my first role off Broadway in a play called The Immoralist. And in those days, I could travel from my apartment where my new wife was on 61st and 3rd Avenue all the way down to 3rd Street in the Bowery for 85 cents. That's what the taxi cost. I think the subway was a dime. But I got the role and I was so excited, and there were no cell phones, no nothing. It was a hot August day. And I raced into a taxi, and I thought, I'm going to be extravagant. I'm going to spend $1. And I said to him, get me home. My wife's waiting for me. I have good news to tell her. You get me there as quick as you can. And he drove this way and that way in the village and up this road and down that road. And when we turned on 3rd Avenue where my apartment was, it was gridlock, absolutely gridlock. You couldn't move. And I didn't want to get out of the taxi because it was August and he had no air conditioning, but the streets were steaming hot. So I just thought, okay, I'll wait. And we're creeping along. And I thought maybe the bill's going to go over $1. What do I do? And we're creeping along slowly in the traffic. And this was a Haitian guy who looked at me and said, you see that, man? You run all over the jungle, afraid of the lion. You end up in its mouth. And once you get that piece of wisdom, which is don't run from the lion, open his mouth and sit inside it. Be there, be in the center of your fear, and you'll come out better. But the more you spend running from it and going for drinks and sex and all those feel good of the moment things, the less able you're going to be to do that. And getting into the lion's mouth early, which I didn't do. It took me a long time to come to myself, but getting in early as you can will be better. In other words, in 2 words, embrace fear.
Well, I do think that's a perfect place to wrap it up. Frank, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so very much for your time. And on behalf of the SAG-AFTRA Foundation, we want to thank you for joining us and for sharing your experience, process, and craft with your fellow performers. Thank you so very much.
Can I say something directly? I realize it's all actors we're talking to. Never give up. Never give up and never give in.